He had thought clearly, what's my reputation? What will people believe I'm capable of? How can I use that to my own advantage?
It was foreigners that killed his wife. He immediately had abandoned the money just to save himself and his family, but the burglars were really nasty. That shows how great that he was at playing public opinion.
In the early 2010s, Greece saw a sudden spike in home-safe sales as the country teetered on the brink of economic collapse. Fears of a forced exit from the euro and a return to the drachma gripped citizens, prompting a mass withdrawal of savings from banks as people sought to safeguard their euros within their own homes. As the financial crisis deepened, so did the crime wave, with home invasions becoming a common occurrence. By 2021, newspaper headlines were flooded with reports of robberies, but one story stood out: the brutal murder of 19-year-old Caroline Crouch during what initially appeared to be a home invasion gone tragically wrong. Living in a luxurious suburb of Athens, Caroline, a young mother, was murdered in her own bed, igniting a nationwide manhunt for the supposed gang of professional foreign thieves responsible. But the truth, as investigators would soon discover, was much closer to home. Caroline's story began in a seemingly idyllic setting on the Greek island of Alonissos, where the vibrant landscape of pine and olive trees met the azure waters of the Aegean Sea. At just 16, Caroline's life took a cinematic turn when she caught the eye of Babis Anagnostopoulos, a charismatic 29-year-old pilot from Athens who made grand, movie-like gestures to capture her attention. He would often fly his helicopter low over her high school, impressing Caroline and drawing envious gazes from her classmates. His charm and good looks were undeniable. Locals likened him to a movie star, and his aerial displays became a well-known spectacle on the island. 4 years later, Caroline and Babis, now married, would be at the center of a tragedy that rocked their quiet island community. In 2021, on a hilltop cemetery overlooking the Aegean, Caroline was laid to rest in a white marble grave adorned with her wedding photo, a somber reminder of the love story that had ended in heartbreak. Babies, holding their infant daughter Lydia, placed a single flower on Caroline's casket, surrounded by mourners who believed the couple had fallen victim to a violent burglary. The crime captivated the nation, with every detail scrutinized as the police struggled to find the perpetrators. For weeks, there was no significant breakthrough, and the grief-stricken Babis continued to publicly mourn his young wife. Then, at Caroline's memorial service, everything changed. Detectives arrived with a startling announcement. A new lead had emerged, and Babis was needed back in Athens to help identify a suspect. As he was escorted away, the island buzzed with speculation that justice for Caroline was finally within reach. Just 80 yards from the cemetery where Caroline Crouch was laid to rest, stood the home where she spent her childhood. Born in Athens on July 12, 2001, Caroline was the daughter of David Crouch, a British ex-oil and gas executive with a distinguished military background, and Susan de la Cuesta, a Filipino woman who managed a cleaning service on the idyllic Greek island of Alonissos. The family moved to their dream home on this lush Mediterranean paradise when Caroline was just 2 years old, where she grew up surrounded by the sea she would soon master. From a young age, Caroline was drawn to the ocean, becoming a certified scuba diver and skilled ocean kayaker, and earning a black belt in kickboxing. She was also academically gifted, fluently speaking 4 languages, including Greek, English, French, and Tagalog. In April 2017, during a candlelit Good Friday procession, Caroline, then 16, caught the eye of Babis Anagnostopoulos, a dashing 29-year-old pilot visiting from Athens. Despite the significant age gap, Babis was captivated by Caroline, and their relationship quickly intensified. He made frequent trips from Athens, often flying his helicopter over her school to impress her. Despite his initial concerns about her young age, their bond deepened, and by the time Caroline was 17, they were romantically involved. Unbeknownst to her parents, Caroline became pregnant, though she tragically miscarried after just 3 months. Around her 18th birthday, Caroline requested her parents' permission to travel to Portugal for a holiday. They agreed, unaware that Babis would accompany her and that the couple planned to marry. On July 15, 2019, just days after her birthday, Caroline and Babis were wed in a small beach ceremony in Portugal. Her parents were shocked upon learning of the marriage, with David meeting his new son-in-law for the first time only after the wedding. Despite Despite the significant age difference, David found himself impressed by Babis, who seemed quiet and self-effacing, traits he appreciated. After their wedding, Caroline and Babis settled in Athens, where Caroline enrolled in university, studying statistics. In June 2020, they welcomed their daughter, Lydia. As the family grew, Caroline's parents gifted them 70,000 euros to purchase land in another Athenian suburb where they planned to build their dream home. On May 6, 2021, the land purchase was finalized, and everything seemed to be falling into place for the young family. But just 5 days later, on the morning of May 11th, tragedy struck. At around 4:20 a.m., Caroline's neighbor Lila was awakened by the sound of Roxy, the family's 7-month-old husky, crying, a sound that was unusual enough to momentarily rouse her from sleep. 2 hours later, Lila was jolted awake again, this time by a distressed phone call from Babis. His voice was muffled, almost unintelligible as he desperately tried to communicate. Alarmed, Lila woke her husband and went to check on the family next door, only to find the street filled with police cars. Unbeknownst to Lila, Babis had also called Greek emergency services minutes before, though the operator struggled to understand him due to the duct tape that covered his mouth. Through his muffled cries, the only words that could be made out were, "Ambulance, ambulance, ambulance." When police entered the apartment, they found a chilling scene. The home had been ransacked, drawers emptied, and upstairs, they discovered Babis on the floor, bound with tape around his neck, mouth, and eyes. Miraculously, he was still alive, but the horror was far from over. The scene inside the apartment was devastating. Caroline Crouch was found lifeless, face down on her bed, strangled to death. Nearby, their 11-month-old daughter, Lydia, sat crying beside her mother's body, unharmed but surrounded by the unthinkable. When police freed Babis Anagnostopoulos, he appeared disoriented, rushing to Caroline's side and asking, "Honey, are you okay?" But it was too late. Caroline was gone, and the family dog, Roxy, had also been brutally killed, hanging from the banister by its leash. The tragedy sent shockwaves through their quiet suburban neighborhood, and Caroline's parents, living back on Alonissos, were devastated when they learned the news from neighbors. For them, it felt like an icy hand had gripped their hearts. Babis recounted the harrowing events to police, describing how a gang of 3 intruders had stormed into their home in the early morning hours, tying him up and taping his mouth, eyes, and neck so tightly that he drifted in and out of consciousness. The assailants were after money, believing the couple had a large sum hidden in the house. Babis led them to 10,000 euros stashed in a Monopoly box, but the thieves, convinced there was more, terrorized Caroline, even threatening to harm Lydia. After an hour of ransacking the home, Babis managed to free himself enough to dial emergency services, using only his nose due to his restraints. News of Caroline's murder quickly spread across Greece and beyond, captivating a global audience with its shocking brutality. Yet, the crime scene provided little evidence to identify the killers. The CCTV memory card was missing, no DNA or fingerprints were found, and surveillance footage in the area revealed no vehicles matching the robbers' supposed movements. Police initially believed they were dealing with a professional gang, notorious for their cold, calculated methods. A suspect, a Georgian national previously linked to a similar robbery, but later released when his DNA failed to match anything found at the crime scene. Babis remained cooperative, constantly engaging with investigators and the media, expressing gratitude and patience even as the investigation stalled. Behind the scenes, however, police were uncovering critical evidence that suggested the truth was far more sinister. A hidden diary belonging to Caroline painted a starkly different picture of her relationship with Babis. The entries detailed frequent arguments, a strained marriage, and Caroline's growing desire to leave her controlling husband. She described Babis as manipulative and overbearing, revealing to her counselor that he monitored her every move, isolating her from friends and restricting her freedom. Portraying Caroline's emotional struggles as postpartum depression, her counselor discovered that it was Babis himself who was the root cause of her distress. As police shifted their focus, they began examining Babis not as a victim, but as a potential suspect. Clues that initially seemed innocuous took on new significance, and the facade of a grieving, devoted husband began to crack. As police dug deeper into the events of that fateful morning, they made a startling discovery on Babis Anagnostopoulos' cell phone, an app that tracked his every movement throughout the day. When they analyzed the data, they found a glaring inconsistency. While Babis claimed to have been bound and incapacitated during the supposed break-in, his step tracker revealed that he had been moving up and down 3 flights of stairs in the house between 5 and 6 a.m. This directly contradicted his account, but the most damning evidence came from Caroline Crouch's smartwatch, a silent witness to her murder. The biometric data revealed that Caroline was sound asleep until 4:05 a.m. when her heart rate suddenly spiked, indicating extreme stress. 6 minutes later, at 4:11 a.m., her heart rate flatlined completely, revealing that she had died well before the time Babis claimed the robbery had occurred. This timeline shattered his narrative of a prolonged, torturous interrogation by supposed robbers. The final piece of evidence was the CCTV camera in their home, from which the memory card had been removed at 1:30 a.m., long before the alleged break-in. It was clear that someone had tampered with it to ensure that no crime would be captured on video. On the day of Caroline's memorial, Babis was flown by helicopter to Athens under the guise of identifying a suspect. Once at the police station, however, he found himself the one being accused. Confronted with overwhelming evidence, the smartwatch data, his step tracker, the missing CCTV footage, and Caroline's diary detailing their tumultuous relationship, Babis finally confessed. According to Babis, the tragedy began with an argument that escalated late the night before Caroline's murder. In his confession, Babis described a heated fight in which Caroline told him to leave the house, throwing their child into her cot in frustration. Overwhelmed, Babis claimed he lost control, strangling Caroline in her sleep to avoid a physical struggle given her kickboxing skills. After killing Caroline, he staged an elaborate crime scene, even killing their dog Roxy to mislead the police. Babis admitted that he staged the robbery because he feared prison and wanted to raise his daughter himself, believing that no one would ever suspect him of such a brutal crime. The nation was stunned when police announced Babis's arrest, and public sympathy quickly turned to outrage. Babis, once seen as a grieving husband, was now viewed as a calculating murderer who had fooled everyone. At his trial, he pleaded manslaughter, arguing that the crime was impulsive and born out of a moment of passion. However, the evidence of his premeditated actions, particularly his removal of the CCTV memory card hours before the murder, painted a different picture. The jury, convinced by the prosecution's portrayal of a controlling and manipulative husband, found him guilty of premeditated murder and sentenced him to life in prison, plus an additional 11 years for killing the dog. During the trial, Caroline's father, David Crouch, claimed that Babis' true motive went beyond domestic disputes. In an interview, David alleged that Babis had confessed in a letter that he was involved with a drug smuggling ring and had killed Caroline to silence her after she threatened to expose his criminal activities. Though this claim remains unverified, it adds a chilling layer to an already dark story. For little Lydia, now just 2 years old, the nightmare of losing both her parents is a legacy she is too young to understand. Caroline's parents, David and Susan, fought for custody and have since relocated to the Philippines, far from the tragic memories in Greece. They are dedicated to giving Lydia a loving upbringing, though they know that one day they will have to explain the painful truth of her parents' past. Until then, they focus on the happier memories of Caroline, sharing stories of her adventurous spirit, her strength, and the charm that Lydia seems to have inherited. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this case, subscribe to Secret Sleuths, and hit the bell to stay updated on our next mystery. Keep sleuthing.